speak, one of the questions I was wondering was, I had a new question, which was how much we look at innovation for climate solutions, right? So we're from Silicon Valley. We're always looking at, what are the amazing technologies that still might be invented. We don't know whether it'll be enough to stop all the methane that's just naturally releasing itself now from the Arctic as it defrosts. But what is anything that we can do that starts to bring the temperature down, or at least slows the process of this degradation? But the other one I think I heard from Jan was about, what do you do for resilience, assuming we're not going to stop it in time, we're not going to stop major damage from happening, and that people are not going to live later the way they're living now. What do you do? What are those solutions? We look at some of the projections where all of Florida is going to be underwater, right? So one of our states where a large portion of population lives, that's likely to be underwater. Big portions of Manhattan and New York City could be underwater. Parts of California and the Central Valley, where we grow all the food in California, can be underwater. So there's a question. I mean, there's almost like there's two major different groups to look at, and do we want to do one or the other or both? There are a lot looking at climate solutions, but we need a lot for climate solutions, so I think that's good. I hardly hear any groups looking at that other question about how do we prepare for the damage, what do we start doing now, what happens.
I think it's even more urgent than that, Lisa.
I'm a hopeful person who's trying to say, well, what can we do while we're here to slow it down? But some group needs to also be thinking about, how are we going to deal with this damage? What damage do we really, making it visible? What do we expect? What actions do we have to take? What do we have to learn before it hits us full speed?
Well, I think it
goes back to Michael's point as well. What do we do for our children?
Yeah.
So that they're prepared.
But to Lisa's point, I think, we don't need to wait for the seas to rise to see the impacts of warming. I mean, the fires are the obvious ones, and the heat domes are obvious because people are dying because of the heat. But what the penny that hasn't really dropped yet, it seems to me, is water in California, water in the agricultural provinces in Canada, water in the Midwest. Not only is there no rainfall and the crops are severely stunted this year, so don't know how we're going to feed ourselves over the course of the winter, but the aquifers are also depleted because state governments have just been looking the other way while farmers have been pumping out the aquifers. So I really believe the urgency is going to be in our face in the course of the next 6 months, not in the course of the next 6 years.
True.
Well, and then the water going to places where it wasn't supposed to be, like in subways and really flooding places, coming up through the sewers and flooding streets. So it was some pretty compelling video of the people who were on the subway train, kind of up to their chests and in water.
I think before you get into some of that level of detail, you're going to need to sort of define a little bit more narrowly what the purpose of the group is, because to Lisa's point, there's a huge amount of issues that flow from climate change, and for us to try and take on all of them is going to be futile if we don't focus very narrowly on the thing that we want to achieve. We won't achieve anything.
Okay,
I think the sense that I have, or just listening, the piece that seems to me that we may be able to do and achieve a result in is getting industry to actually focus on doing the things that are going to make a difference now, right? Because we know there's lots of money slopping around in the climate change area. We know there's people that, if they're properly directed and supported and encouraged, will take steps to do something productive. If we can help them funnel that money into things that will make a difference rather than things that look good in the annual report, right, then we've actually started to achieve something. So my sense is that if we narrow it down, yes, the world has to prepare for living with 3 degrees of warming or whatever it is, and there's a whole lot of other things that need to happen in that. But, you know, if we want to make an actionable difference, then we've got to focus on the things that we can do quickly to make an impact. That's my sense.
I agree totally.
I'm going to add my 5 cents as well. Is it 2?
He can add
Right.
Go,
Well,
go for
about
8.
5.
Go for 8. I want 8.
For you, it will be 5. Go
Somewhere
for it.
between 2 and 5. What is attractive to me in terms of this conversation, sort of what we're playing with here, is I liked Ivan's orientation to it's calling it an action forum of some sort, right? Action forum, a forum for action. And I quite resonated, of course, given that we're in constant conversations with what Lisa just pointed out, which is this duality. So action for what? Action on the one hand related to climate restoration and repair, something that acknowledges that we need to act behind the recognition that we don't have to argue anymore, at least among ourselves. There's enough argument still going around. Is the climate, is this all natural processes? Is it human made? Whatever. I'm all for going for this topic, for this group here. Let's just declare that we're in deep doo-doo. And I think as Jan pointed out, it's a 6-month thing. It's not a 6-year thing or a 60-year thing. This thing is accelerating quickly. It's coming our way in terms of the level of recognition that climate, in fact, is shifting. And it's shifting in a direction and with a trajectory that's getting us to 3+ degrees over the next so many years. So once we just acknowledge that and say that's what we're about, then the duality between really interesting actions that we could learn about and understand around climate restoration and repair, because that's sort of one topic, is how do we restore and repair the capacity for this planet to remain at all within the livable range for ourselves. And then the other topic being, and yet at the same time, we need to recognize that this thing is on the run and we need to think about resilience, right?
And
we need to
how do
think
we
about our
prepare?
children. We need to think about what are the actions that we need to take for the benefit of a generation that